Well, hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Jenna Richter. I'll be introducing the event, and as we move through our program, I just want to point out a couple of logistical things as we get started. We have a chat going. Please feel free to put in the chat, let us know where you're zooming in from, and if you've ever attended a local to global justice event before. We'll also be posting regularly in the chat the link to our website and to other events that we have coming up in the future. As for today, I just want to give a quick overview of what Local to Global Justice is. We are a community student organization. We were created in August 2001, so this is indeed the 20th year of Local to Global Justice, which is amazing. And we're very, very happy to be here and to be sharing this event with you all today. Since 2001, our primary goal has been to educate and engage with ASU students and the greater community about local and global justice concerns and issues, while promoting diversity, freedom of speech, and academic freedom of discussion. We believe it is vital to connect local social justice issues and sustainability issues to larger global struggles. Generally speaking, we have held our biggest event on an annual basis is the 3-day forum and festival, which many of you have attended, and hopefully many of you will attend in the future. With the pandemic conditions of this year, we changed our event. Instead of having a 3-day event across Phoenix and the ASU Tempe campus, we're actually holding 3 separate virtual community forums, of which this is the first one in the series. Next year, we are hoping to go back to the live format, so please keep your ears open for when that's going to happen. Every year we have a different theme to organize our event around. This year we chose the theme of community resilience and action. The major questions we're trying to address through these sets of community forums is to think about how communities have endured the last 4 years of disinvestment, attacks on civil liberties, and the violent response to peaceful protests that call out the structural racism, misogyny, xenophobia that contribute to systemic violence for communities. In this community forum, we want to recognize and support the resiliency and indeed the resurgency and vibrancy of community action as a means of challenging neoliberal individualization of community issues and concerns. We're asking, how can our communities thrive, not just survive? How can we collectively face and address issues like racial injustice, police brutality, environmental degradation, and political marginalization? So today, please, if you have any questions, I'll be introducing Sam in a moment, who will introduce our panelists. But if you have any questions for the panelists, for any of them individually or for all of them collectively, please go ahead and put those questions in the chat. And hopefully at the end of the panel presentation, we will have a chance to ask a question or two. But generally speaking, what we're thinking is going to happen is that at the end of the panel presentation, we'll have a quick musical interlude. And then we will move into breakout rooms where we can collectively discuss in small groups some ideas of how to collectively address some of these systemic issues based on what we've heard from the panelists. And then we'll come back together in the last 20 minutes and share a little bit about what we think the next steps could be to increase community resilience and action. Please consider a donation at our website, which is localtoglobal.org, and also hold the dates for our future community forums. There'll be one on March 20th. Another Saturday from 10:30 to 12, and our general focus there will be immigration. We'll have representatives from No Mas Muertos, People's Defense Initiative, the Lutheran Social Services of the Southwest, and as Beth mentioned before, music by Walt Richardson. And then on April 22nd, Thursday, April 22nd, from 6 to 7:30, we'll be having our final community forum on environmental and climate justice with speakers from climate healers, Colombian water protectors, and also speakers on Indigenous sovereignty and resource protection. All of those will be available via Eventbrite, and if you signed up for this event, we'll be sure to contact you and make sure that you understand how to register for those events too. Also keep your ears peeled. We'll be having a 20th anniversary live event, hopefully in September, to celebrate the founders of Local to Global Justice, to catch up with people who are now all the way across the world, doing amazing work in so many different places to protect both the environment and marginalized communities everywhere, bringing those local struggles back to the global and then taking the global and bringing it back to the local. So I just also want to call out our organizing team. These kinds of events wouldn't be possible except through the amazing dedication of so many people who volunteer their time. And we always welcome new people to our group to help us organize these kinds of events. So if you have any interest in that whatsoever, please make sure to check out our website and get in touch with us to help us organize this. So I especially want to say thank you to Sam, Lane, Daniel, Sultana, Christine, Richard, Eric, Brandon, Ankit, Emma, Beth. All of you have been amazing in helping us organize the event. You'll see them again in the breakout rooms. There'll be one local to global justice representative in each of the breakout rooms to help moderate that. I also want to thank our sponsors, Arizona State University's undergraduate student government, as well as the School of Social Transformation. And a lot of this event is also funded through private donors. So again, if you have a few extra bucks to throw our way to keep these events open and free to the public and going on for the next 20 years at least, please consider a donation at localtoglobal.org. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam Royall, one of our student leaders, who will introduce the panelists and the format for today's presentation. Sam?
Thank you, Jen. So as Dr. Richter said, my name is Sam Royall. I'm a second-year Justice Studies PhD student, and I use she, her pronouns. So I'm just going to be introducing the three incredible panelists that will be speaking with all of us today. They each have about 10-minute presentations prepared, and there will be a bit of time after each of those presentations for a brief Q&A. And as Jen said, the rest of the schedule will follow as she mentioned. But so we'll start off with Grace Gamez. Grace Gamez, PhD, is a mother, partner, embodied leader, researcher, and storyteller. She is the founder of Reframing Justice, an advocacy platform in Arizona for directly impacted communities to promote responses to harm that center transformative justice and healing. She values wholeheartedness, complexity, accountability over punishment, and brave visioning. And so Grace will be conducting the first presentation, and then afterwards we'll hear from Klee. Klee Benally is a Dene musician, traditional dancer, artist, filmmaker, and Indigenous anarchist. Klee currently lives in Flagstaff, Arizona, and is originally from Black Mesa and has worked nearly all his life at the front lines in struggles to protect Indigenous sacred lands. Klee provides strategic planning and direct action training with Indigenous Action Media and is currently the national coordinator for cleanup environmental justice campaigns. Klee has been an entertainer with Native American Music Award-winning rock group Blackfire and the internationally acclaimed traditional dance group, the Jones Benally family. And then finally, we will hear from Mimi A. And Mimi is dedicated to achieving social justice and Black liberation. She is a co-director and art minister at Black Lives Matter Phoenix Metro. And Mimi is a teacher of love and has a true passion for building her community, abolishing the carceral state, and ending all forms of anti-Black violence. Mimi has been organizing against systemic oppression for 11 years and is also a scholar in the field of justice and plans to continue engaging in work that furthers the liberation of all oppressed people with Black folks at the center. So with that, I will turn it over to Grace. As Jen said, make sure if you have questions for any and all of our panelists, just put those in the chat, and afterwards we will be able to address some of those. But yes, with that, I would like to welcome Grace.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here and sharing space with us today. We were asked to focus our thoughts on where we've been, where we are, and where we're going, all in 10 minutes, which is a really tall ask, and I will do my best. I think the future stuff might have to wait for Q&A. So I am the founder and coordinator of Reframing Justice at AFSC. And the project itself was born out of my own abolitionist politic, which tells me that we must organize from a place of radical imagination, dreaming, and love. Abolition asks us to use creative thinking around how we relate to each other. My abolitionist politic centers core human needs around belonging, purpose, and dignity, which work together to create safety. And it foregrounds the leadership, dreams, and vision of people most impacted by the punishment system in Arizona. You can go to the next slide. So before I jump into the research that I selected to talk about today, I want to say that no single one of us has all of the answers. In my opinion, we need diverse visions and movements pressing simultaneously. What is true for me might not resonate for you, and that's okay. But we have to be brave enough to try and brave enough not to cancel each other when we disagree. Practicing different ways to relate to each other when we're all conditioned to depend on the state in different ways requires commitment and a constant returning, constant questioning and iterating. It requires that you have a crew of people you can trust and practice with together. To me, abolition is about co-creating and prefiguring the world we want to live in, and it's a discipline of agape love. So for the past 2 years, I've been working on a community safety research project with a local collective here in Tucson called Flowers and Bullets. And the goal of that work was to offer a more holistic practice of community safety, one that exists outside of carceral logics. You can go to the next slide. So the goal of the Barrio Centro Community Safety Research Project was to explore what a public safety strategy might look like outside of common sense ideas which posit police, incarceration, exclusion, banishment as essential to community safety, and to ascertain how people already, every day, practice non-carceral forms of safety. Dismantling our failed public safety strategy requires more than policy and sentencing reform. It requires rethinking what safety means to people and considering what is possible beyond the borders that have been pre-configured for us. Our project was qualitative, comprised of open-ended survey questions and a photo elicitation component. The pictures that you see throughout this presentation are images that represent safety for the Flowers and Bullets Collective. The project was in part a sensory or somatic exploration of safety. We asked residents in the neighborhood of Barrio Centro, which is one of the most surveilled neighborhoods in Tucson, what does safety look like and what does safety feel like? Next slide, please. What dispossessed communities and people know is that if you wait for the state to feed you, you will wait starving and eventually starve waiting. So one learns how to creatively produce, circulate, and multiply resources to survive and thrive. And this political theory is rooted in emergence. Flowers and Bullets emerged out of the anti-ethnic studies bill that became law in the state of Arizona. Many of the core organizers of Flowers and Bullets watched TUSD officials walk into their classrooms, pack up books, and ban them, cantos that sang of a collective history in this land. In 2012, the very existence of Chicanx people was labeled seditious by the state of Arizona. And this site of trauma became the soil where the first semillas or seeds that grew into Flowers and Bullets were planted. Ongoing theft pointed the way towards freedom dreams. Through backyard gardening, food production, and art, Flowers and Bullets builds deep neighborhood relationships and addresses historical trauma in the community of Barrio Centro, just caused by gentrification, high rates of system involvement, substance use, food insecurity, and economic inequality. So in 2016, Flowers and Bullets repurposed a vacant school that had been shuttered since 2004. And the school, Julia Keene, was the hub of the neighborhood. It's where after school programming was held, summer programming, that's the poll that people voted at. So, excuse me, it really was central to the neighborhood. So they re-envisioned that property as a midtown farm and cultural center. And the goal of the farm is to create different pipelines, moving away from and against the punishment system and back towards relationship and community. Next slide. Our findings challenged control-based approaches to safety, such as neighborhood watch programs, and aligned with affective safety, meaning strong relational attachments, creative action, pleasure, play. It's fluid and multi-determined. We found that insurgent safety make social vulnerability manageable via resources and people that encircle, uplift, and resolve lack for one another. Next slide, please. Survey participants identified multiple components that added up to feeling safe in their neighborhood. Primary among them was having a relationship with their neighbors. Flowers and Bullets intentionally creates meaningful opportunities for the community to get to know one another. They cultivate co-learning spaces and offer a range of workshops such as backyard gardening, chickens, food production, beekeeping, soap making. The farm also serves as a site for community mural planning, music concerts, wet down days for the children in the summer. And each event represents an opportunity for the neighborhood to enter into deeper relationship with one another. Next slide. The idea that care and connection is essential to safety and survival has come into sharp relief during the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID has made the care methods that marginalized communities have long employed both rational and urgent. Flowers and Bullets mobilized and responded in service to the neighborhood at the onset of the pandemic. They partnered with a local brewery here in Tucson to make hand sanitizer and the neighborhood association to make masks. And over the course of 2 days, they distributed free kits to whoever needed them. It's important to note that it wasn't city officials that organized and responded to the needs of the community. It was the neighborhood itself that mobilized to protect and care for one another. And they prove that ordinary people have the power to collectively free themselves. Next slide. Our findings also underscored that job opportunities and thriving locally owned businesses are essential to safe communities. Economic self-determination is important because Tucson, like so many other cities across the country, is in a battle against gentrification. Tucson's downtown housing market and industry have displaced families that have been rooted there for generations. Long neglected barrios are now attractive financial opportunities for investors because they border downtown and the University of Arizona. And so proximate neighborhoods like Barrio Centro are being affected. One way to safeguard a community from being overrun by developers who frequently demand ordinances that further displace the most vulnerable among us is through supporting and strengthening small community businesses and hiring from within the community. So this led Flowers and Bullets to create and begin a food truck called Geronimo's Revenge. The pandemic recently caused it to close down after 5 years in operation, but it served Tucson's first locally organic, sustainable food from a food truck. And they served Tucson classics, and it was really popular. The crew said, safety to us means the ability to start your own businesses and hire those in underserved communities with limited resources and opportunities. Next slide, please. At the end of the survey, we asked respondents what should be funded. And we received responses that did not name police. And instead, people asked for things like shade trees and community gardens, public art, green open spaces to congregate and play, block parties, increased access to childcare and after-school programming. This is insurgent safety. Carceral safety is letting people become infected in prisons and jails from COVID-19. It is the rationality that led armed white men to chase and kill Ahmaud Arbery and brazenly record it. It is in the knee on George Floyd's neck. It's in the no-knock warrant that killed Breonna Taylor. It's in the criminalization and policing of difference that killed Elijah McClain. It's in the transphobia that killed Tony McDade. Carceral safety is the logic that would name property destruction violence, but arm police with military-grade weapons and call it keeping the peace. The modes of sociality that we identified of being with and for one another draw from a wellspring of Black, Brown, and Indigenous cosmologies. Insurgent safety isn't a definition, a possession, or a fixed set of ideas and practices. It is a commitment to non-carceral forms of relationality. The insurgent safety practice by Flowers and Bullets affirms that abolition is about presence, not absence. The focus is not on what is torn down, defunded, or eliminated. The focus is on what can be built that would make life tenable for everyone. The findings of our research reveal that the roots of safety are found in revolutionary love, where safety is an active practice of being and building with and for one another. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace, for sharing all about flowers and bullets and your important work there. There will be time, as we said, at the end of all three panelists for questions. So if any of you have questions lingering right now after hearing about Grace's important work, then definitely just put them in the chat or write them down to save them for afterwards. But now we will move on to hear from Klee. Oh, that's actually for Mimi's slide, if you just want to go back one, Daniel.
Are we good to go?
Yes, good to go.
Yate ata asinflo she Klee dashijine torich eatni shabashish chinado nakudine dashanella shama a beathachi auto beathachi dashiche zithajinde na sha auto kinthane shahoan. My name is Klee Benally. I'm originally from Black Mesa on the Diné or Navajo Nation. Currently, I reside here in the occupied lands known as Flagstaff. Really have spent a lot of time in my life being educated and raised in a traditional manner. My father's a Hatathli or medicine practitioner, and my elders, particularly my grandmothers, are matriarchs in the resistance against forced relocation up in the Big Mountain area on Black Mesa, where our lands for many decades, pretty much all of my life, were ravaged by coal mining operations and a divide and conquer tactic initiated by US Congress through a law called PL 93-531, which was a relocation act, which led to the forced removal of more than 20,000 of our people. So I've been involved in a range of different struggles for the purposes of the discussion, and I have it's great to be here and see many familiar faces. I've been to local to global justices since I was young. I don't know how far back it goes, but my own political growth I credit to some of the forums that local to global justice had, and some of the side discussions, sometimes more importantly than the formal presentations. So it's good to be here in good company. With that said, I've over the years I've presented at local to global justice around a range of issues, particularly sacred sites and work that we've done here locally in so-called Flagstaff to protect the holy San Francisco peaks from ski area expansion and development. But today, my primary focus has been since March, actually pretty much a year on out. It'll be a year, March 14th. When we initiated Kinthana Mutual Aid as a response to the threat of COVID-19 and its impact throughout its devastating impact throughout our region. This organization is really something that came out of Tullahoan Info Shop, which I helped to start in 2007, which is a radical Indigenous, anti-colonial, anti-capitalist resource center, more a community center where we've done mutual aid work, primarily for unsheltered relatives for many years, and confronted a range of social and environmental justice issues operating out of there. In April, I helped to form a network called Indigenous Mutual Aid, and we're primarily focused on linking up and sharing resources between a range of different Indigenous groups throughout what we recognize as Turtle Island, to ensure support for those most impacted. I want to speak just a little bit right now to some of that work and how it's connected to sacred lands defense, and then extend the opportunity for those of you who will join me in the breakout to go a little deeper and talk about a range of the dynamics of these issues and really what we can do. I I guess I'll start by saying that, in just 2 months after the first cases of COVID-19 last year on the Navajo Nation, we had the highest rate per capita of COVID-19 cases compared to any US state. And today, the CDC reports that Indigenous peoples are twice as more likely to pass on due to COVID-19 than white people. And so this is a crisis upon many crises. And a lot of folks, especially the initial news reports, were focused on these primary factors, that approximately 33% of people living on the Dene Nation have access to no running water or electricity, that we only have 13 grocery stores serving nearly 200,000 residents. And so the Navajo Nation is sort of viewed as a food desert. And also the other statistics that were sort of thrown out in the media, that Navajo Nation has approximately 50% unemployment, and that we only have 12 healthcare facilities throughout the region. We had to really ask ourselves, because there's this victimhood narrative that was being projected out there. And there's also another narrative that is about resilience. But sometimes I find a discomfort using that term resilience, even though it's a powerful term that can help motivate and inspire. At the same time, the question of enduring violence and oppression is another one where it's like, well, at some point there has to be a break. We aren't just made to endure. We have to end the conditions of our oppression, and that's where I focus. So we had to ask ourselves, how has this pandemic impacted our people so disproportionately? Is it simply because we merely lack the power lines and plumbing? Is it because there aren't massive corporate stores on every corner of our reservations that we're subject to such a disproportionate impact? Would we really be that much more immune from this disease or this virus if every member of our tribe just had a job? And so the underlying narratives that were being projected out didn't analyze the issues, the geopolitical issues that we've faced systematically here, which is how resource colonialism, how colonial violence and violence against the earth has made our people more susceptible to viruses such as COVID-19, and how this isn't the first virus that we have faced, that we have medicines and understandings that have been fragmented and broken by design through settler colonialism. And so, what is omitted from the spectacle of COVID-19 disaster tourism has been that these statistics are due to these ongoing attacks against Mother Earth, because where there's an environmental crisis, there's also a crisis of humanity, as a cultural and a social crisis, because we are people of the earth. And an attack against Mother Earth is an attack against our cultural ways of life, our autonomy, and by extension, our self and collective care and sufficiency. While economic deprivation and resource scarcity are realities that we face, our story is much more complex and more powerful than that. It's a story of the space between harmony and devastation. It's a story of resistance, not just resilience, to fight and protect Mother Earth. And this is a story that extends to many other Indigenous communities. The current resistance and ongoing resistance to Resolution Copper's attempt to desecrate Oak Flat, led by the San Carlos Apache, is a clear one. The desecration of South Mountain there in so-called Phoenix, the desecration of the San Francisco Peaks, the desecration of Lake Oahe, and many other places by pipelines for oil transportation. These sacred places represent part of the covenant that we have as Indigenous people with creation to maintain balance and harmony with our existence. And so while COVID-19 spreads, for example, throughout the Navajo Nation, we have a 2,500 square mile cloud of methane that's hanging over our heads in the so-called four corners. And although there's no conclusive evidence of what the cause is, NASA scientists have stated that the source is likely from established coal, gas, and methane mining and processing. And that's because we have two massive coal-fired power plants, the San Juan Generating Station, the Four Corners Power Plant, that operate in the area. And if regarded as a single entity, these two plants are the second largest consumer of coal in the US. Most of the generated power is transmitted right over and past reservation homes to power settler colonies in Arizona. Like, you know, the Phoenix is part of that entanglement, geopolitical entanglement. And they go to Nevada and California. So it's not news that over time breathing pollution from sources such as coal-fired power plants damages our lungs and weakens our body's ability to fight respiratory infections. And we have a litany of environmental crises, and this is a crisis upon crises because of this, from the forced relocation, the depletion of our aquifers, and sustained coal mining, to the thousands of abandoned uranium mines throughout our region, which has led the EPA to close 22 wells. And that's not, you know, 22 wells that about 50,000 members of our nation rely on. And that's not factored into the equation regarding our susceptibility to COVID-19, but it is a factor that we see because we live it, we have survived it, and we continue to resist it. And so, again, I have a litany of things that we could sort of identify as part of the ecological catastrophes, but I want to sort of wrap up here by establishing that, you know, in response to this crisis, we've seen a powerful movement of Indigenous mutual aid and increased action and interventions against these neoliberal agendas that are rooted in capitalism and colonialism. You know, and this hasn't just looked like radical redistribution of material resources, but it does also look like empowering Indigenous autonomy to ensure that we're not just dependent on the very systems that have always attacked and have been designed to attack and undermine our ways of being. And I want to note that, you know, this isn't just a 4-year break or 4-year position that things were escalated. You know, Standing Rock occurred under the Obama administration. Mass deportations of undocumented relatives happened under the Obama administration. You know, the point is that in order to fully stop these mines, and if we look at, you know, this issue, when we look at global warming as one of the greatest crises facing humanity, well, from an Indigenous perspective, global warming is a consequence of the war that the system has waged against Mother Earth. It's a symptom of how we're out of balance, and we need to restore that balance. So in order to fully stop these mines, these power plants, these dams, these pipelines, we also have to stop the political machinery and the systems that generate them. And so we have many prophecies when we talk about the future, and I think that's part of the task for us as presenters here today, is to talk about the future. We have to consider that within, you know, the next 7 generations, as many people are familiar with, but, you know, with things like uranium mining, we have to consider the impacts of 700 generations down the line because of how significant radioactive contamination lasts, what the half-life of uranium is, and the threats to our communities. And so, you know, as this sickness ravages our lands, we must ask ourselves, will we continue to allow these systems to recuperate and restore our forced dependency upon them? What can be done to resist them? The defense of lands that are sacred to Indigenous peoples are the front lines in the struggles for our existence and for all existence. If we desire to exist, we must continue to defend the sacred, to liberate Mother Earth. And defending the sacred means fighting back to protect Mother Earth, which is to say existence itself. So we can talk all we want about bringing our people up and each other up and enduring suffering or resilience in the pain that we face in our communities. But how far are we going to get unless we start working simultaneously to tear the system down, to end the conditions of our suffering? This means direct action. This means embracing diversity of tactics and ending the liberal movement policing of radical tendencies in the streets and the powerful uprisings, whether it's for Black lives or whether it's against sacred lands desecrations, or whether it's against the xenophobia and the neo-fascism that we face today. And this also means ending and abolishing the ally industrial complex and the missionizing of charity work in our communities and the perpetuation that we are victims. Colonization is war. And if we are to truly understand that and embrace what it means then to end that fight, we need accomplices in this fight, not allies. So I want to thank you for your time, and I look forward to extending the conversation, whatever questions you have, and speaking to some of the practical experiences. I'm not an academic. The streets have been where I've gotten, in the hogans, in the ceremonies, of where I've gotten my education. So I like, and the education has come from action, and I look forward again to extending these conversations and finding meaningful ways that we can work together.
Thank you so much, Klee, for your discussion of the intersections between sacred land defense and mutual aid. And yeah, if, as I said before, if people have questions specifically about anything that Klee just discussed, then definitely put those in the chat or save them for later. These are all very important conversations that need to be continued. So we definitely want to hear all of your thoughts and questions. And with that, we will move on to the last panelist for today, which is Mimi A. So yeah, you can take it from here.
Hi, y'all. I want to thank you again all so much for having me come here to speak on some of the work that we've been doing, again, where we're at, where we've been, and where we are going. I'm going to try to go pretty fast here so I can get to all of the slides, but it's important before I begin that we note that BLM Phoenix Metro, it has been around since 2016. It restructured. This version of it has been around since 2019, and it is primarily a Black, queer, woman, and femme-led organization, and it is comprised of 6 ministries. And so this is just going to go over some of the work that we've done and how it relates to gay again. So if we can go to the next slide. So I'm just going to speak on each of the ministries' work. And again, I'll break it up in ministries, but all of this work has been done collectively by all of us. So obviously last year we had a major uprising. So we saw that Phoenix City Council did not respond. The folks who were supposed to respond and make changes based upon the things that were happening as far as police brutality in our communities. So as we were calling to defund, the Phoenix Police Department actually got an increase in funding at that point. So again, we held rallies outside of City Hall to kind of draw attention to some of these issues. Policy had also been working on a 30-year fight with community organizations for a OAT and CRB, and that's the Office of Accountability and Transparency, and a civilian review board. There were some complications. Oh, somebody's outside having a good time. There were some complications with this policy. We wrote it in a way where it could actually reduce harm, but unfortunately it got into the hands of the state, and the state put in its 2 cents, and it turned into something that would actually be more harmful. So we had to rally against that OAT and CRB. It's still a fight that we're kind of working with and playing with and trying to get some autonomy over. And this essentially would, if this policy was made correctly, would essentially hold cops accountable for murdering our people. So the defund work in Phoenix is still moving. We are in a coalition again with other organizations who are currently working on a fight for the MOU, and that's memoranda of understanding between the police and the city to make sure that cops aren't getting all of these raises and getting all of these additional bonuses and extensions of power in their contract, which usually happens and is what they're trying to make happen right now, is more extensions of power. And again, so policy is also currently working on a few drop the charges campaigns, unfortunately over the summer. And then again, this is future and present here. 400 people were arrested, and some of those were our people and really close to us. So we have ran a campaign with other organizations to make sure that those charges get dropped. So far, it has been successful. There's an ABC 15 story. I'm not sure if y'all have been watching it with Dave Biscabo, But if you if you follow that, you can see it's called Politically Charged. You can see what's been going on with us and our comrades over the summer as a result of us saying enough is enough. And if you look there, you can look over a list of our demands. It's also on our website that I can drop in the chat after this if you want more information on some of the things that we're demanding here. And then if we can go to the next slide. So again, just some stuff, and I know we had our other presenter who kind of went into more detail about this, just so that people know where we're coming from and not like from left field. But what is defund? Defund the police, and just give you a little bit of information about that, like how it gained global attention in response to the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Deion Johnson. It's about divesting from harm and reinvesting into our communities, reducing the size, scope, and power of police departments. And it is a part of a long-term strategy to abolish the police. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, so one of the other works that we moved over this summer was a Black People's Justice Fund. So we raised over $200,000 into a Black People's Justice Fund, but that's us, BLM Phoenix Metro with Mass Liberation Arizona, with Drinking Gourd Farms, with Phoenix Local Organizing Collective, and with Black Phoenix Organizing Collective. So we created a Black Abolitionist Collaborative to funnel the money into so that we could support our people on the ground and make sure they had 24-hour around-the-clock jail support with attorneys, and that they still have attorneys now to fight the cases that they're currently facing for the people whose charges who haven't been dropped. So this fund also was used over the summer to help house a Black single mother and her child. It was also used to support the legal fees of Black trans women and to ensure housing for Black trans women, and to make sure that they had the safety that they needed when they were getting out of jail. So the fund currently is still moving primarily for legal fees, and we're probably still, and I can drop a link if folks want to donate money into that fund. We would still need some finances to take care and provide for our people, but we also had a Free Percy press conferences we use this fund for, and Percy is one of our comrades in community. His charges have not been dropped. It's very important, if people want to make a video, say Free Percy, hashtag drop the charges, MCAO, that's the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. But Percy is our comrade who is a young Black male who's been targeted by the state all summer. They have been surveillancing him in his home. They have been following him on the streets. So Phoenix Police Department is, they're partnering with a federal organization called ACTIC to harass and convict this young Black man. So what we need to do is put a stop to it and make sure that these charges get dropped, because it's absolutely ridiculous. Percy did absolutely nothing. So if we can go to the next slide. So transformative justice, and again, the doctor, kind of went off a little bit more on some of this kinds of stuff, but more of the analysis about some of the things that we are looking for in the future. So transformative justice and healing, we don't need cages. We can have this. We can hold each other accountable without throwing people away. We can build communities. Free community education. Our communities need education. We don't need incarceration. Defund the police. FTP, right? Community safety. We need we can keep ourselves safe, personal safety, de-escalation. BLM has a whole security team built out with 2 paid organizers right now too. But we can keep us safe. So mutual aid, right? And we see like these mutual aids since COVID popping up, these mutual aid organizations, and BLM, we've also rolled out our own forms of mutual aid as well for our communities, Black People's Justice Fund being one of them, but also some of our COVID relief work. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So we have an education ministry. Our education ministry is a Black-only ministry. Our education ministry rolled out the Afro Book Club. So we're exploring Black creativity through literary genres. That's Afrofuturism, that's Black horror stories, that's folk tales and fairy tales. We have Underground Seminar, rolled out, and that is a Black liberation learning space. So we've read How We Get Free, Combahee River Collective, Our Prison's Obsolete, Angela Davis, Assata Shakur autobiography. Again, what we're trying to do is make sure that our communities are educated and know what the things around them is, what's happening, and are able to name what's killing them here. So we also have an open mic, our education ministry. I think this is open for people of color and Black people. So if y'all want to come through to open mic, that's what's up. We also rolled out a culture night, learning about the Black African diaspora together and things like this. So that's much on our education ministry. We're super proud of that work we've been able to develop. If we can go to the next slide. So we have our art ministry. So we started up and worked on murals, banner drops with the Art Collective. And Art Collective is a group of locally based, like, dope organizers who came together and formed a collective, and we've been working closely with them. So yes, you know, there's work still moving on in that aspect as well, but just making sure that art is also incorporated into the movement, and that's a lot of, and it is much needed. So we're glad to be working with them. So we also held an all-Black event with the Healing Ministry, and that was Healing and Art in the Park. I'll go into it more in the Healing Ministry, but after a long summer of protests, we cited our communities and our peoples that we needed a break and we needed some healing. So we did some healing in art, and we are working on the movement mixtape right now. This is a project that is, again, ongoing. So we do have a meeting. If you're a musician, this is people of color only, Black and people of color. We have a meeting on Sunday at 7:30 about this movement mixtape, but we want to make sure that our chants are recorded, our rhythms are recorded, the rhythms of our people songs are recorded when it comes to leaving something behind for people to look back on the work that we did. And so we've designed a new BLM logo. It's on our Instagram page. You can check it out. It's very beautiful. Our own minister designed it. It's gorgeous. Already onto the next slide, if you can. Okay, so we have a community healing and wellness ministry. Our community healing and wellness ministry is a Black-only ministry as well. We have monthly peaceful self-healing events, and we collaborate with a lot of other, like, local Black femme leaders in the city of Phoenix. So we have meditation and reflection. We do they do some sip and paints. We do collective yoga, self-awareness sessions, meditations. We do centering self-love workshops, guiding breath and yoga, art activities. Again, they partner with us, and then liberation and relationships and building liberated relationships. So we've been working on currently a lot of the transformative justice work in the healing ministry and bringing that to the forefront, and taking up on some emergent strategies when it comes to how we treat each other and how we're in community with each other. And if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so if you look, our healing ministry these are all of our cute little flyers, you know, we've just been kind of like doing it. So if you're Black or you know some Black people and there's some kind of centering in locally Black people, or, you know, it's COVID, so they can either hop on a Zoom call too, but who could enjoy and benefit from some kind of healing, please, you can send them here. I don't know why they chose a little picture of me, but yes, I'm on a yoga mat in the hot sun and it's still good. All right, next slide. So here's some of the healers that the healing ministry has collabed with. So Rissa Vibes, there's her Instagram there. Drinking Gourd Farms, coughing and Drinking Gourd Farms is not, it's semi-running right now, but coffee is still in action and doing yoga. So there's also our healing ministry did a Shining Light on Revolution event. We tabled at an event, Brunches in Tempe. I know some people are familiar with that. We do virtual yoga, and we do nature appreciation. We'll go on, healing ministry will take us on hikes and things like this. So if we can go to the next slide. So some of the people healing ministry collabed with is our activism ministry. Healing ministry members guided breath and grounding for victims of families of police violence. So a lot of those times before our actions happen, we family members of those who have died, Dion Johnson and others, we bring them in and we kind of grounded. Our healing ministry kind of grounds them in the things that we're doing, and again, just breathing and stuff before we go out and hit the streets and things like that as well. And honestly, before we start meetings, all that kind of stuff. So education ministry, again, is going to be, the breathing is we need to be centered in those spaces. Southwest Center for HIV and AIDS. We were able to speak at one of their events. And the Gender Inclusive Young Doula Ebony led, we led some yoga for members there. And then we did the self-love coach, Sebai, and we led the workshop on centering love as a revolutionary act. So our healing ministry is super dope. And our healing minister is super dope and should be plan on hiring her full-time here. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so again, here's some organizations and folks you can connect with if you want to tap in more to that. And also there's the healing ministry's email too, if you want to really just, get boots on the ground and start doing some of that work in it. And next slide. Again, it's Black only. So activism. So Sierra is a Black woman who Tempe Honda disrespected with one of their, disrespectful white supremacist employees. And so we came after Tempe Honda. We won the case. Sierra got $60,000. So essentially, we did a press conference outside of their business. They tried to kick us off their business and their premises. We stepped on the sidewalk. We told them it was public ground, and we continued the press conference. And we told there was a lot of misogynoir going on. So this is why we had to continue with the case. But the activism case, it was one, obviously, and Sierra got her paid out for that. Trey Kumian got a settlement, $300,000 against Tempe police. So Tempe police, again, is pulling guns out on Black folks and scaring them half to death. So this is what happens. Again, we have to rally community to come in their defense and make sure that they're getting settled out in these particular ways. And so even if the money is not going to change the systemic violence, but is going to support the community in the time when they're dealing with harm. So again, policy knows the absolute goals. So, and that was the abolition of the defund and things that we were speaking about earlier. So we did a 3-state action. And for Rodney Applewhite was killed by New Mexico police. And so we got together with the 3 states and we said, that's it, we're all going to do an action. They went to the governors. We went outside and with Rodney's family, who's here in Arizona, that's why we did that there, but it happened in New Mexico. And our demands got made, the family's demands got made for us to release the video and these things right the day, like absolute after. So Percy and Sue were freed from community pressure. So they were let out of jail again, but Percy is still facing charges. So we still need to do more. And if you want to rally around community to help, this is something that's very important. Drop the false charges and release Percy, not release Percy because we got him free, but we still need the charges dropped. And then moving Tempe towards police alternatives, we're at a round table with Tempe, with the city of Tempe, a community reinvestment roundtable, because we can't call it defund and FTP roundtable, right? But that's what, a lot of activism and some of policy is helping right now with trying to build those relationships so we can get stuff reinvested. And then, okay, next slide. So we held a vigil for Deon Johnson. And Deon Johnson was murdered by Arizona DPS trooper on the same day as George Floyd. We had our Juneteenth actions and we held our press conferences. James Garcia as well, we partnered with organizations on that one in political prosecutions, Trey Kumpian, and then Sierra. And, it's very important to note how and then again, the 3-state action we had, and then this picture, Abolish the Police. This was in Tempe, where we dropped this banner here. But it's important to note how nationally we were able to get people on the same page to come out, and Ben Crumpet, who is Breonna Taylor's lawyer, was actually able to come out and help support us on some of this stuff, just because the heightened sense of what was going on, And if we can go to the next slide. So just some marches. So DPS, surprised. I know some people on this line were there. March to DPS, and we had the DPS march at one location. We had to switch location last minute because the feds were waiting for us outside with tanks. So, but a lot of y'all still were able to make it to the other ones, so appreciate it. Defund Tempe rally. We had a huge action in Tempe. Defund Tempe hearing. Justice for Breonna Taylor and Dion Hollins, Breonna Taylor and Dion Johnson. This was our 10-3 action. It was our last one. We've kind of slowed down since then because a lot of our comrades were arrested. Kate, I see you on this line. Thank you so much for making sure that one of those people that day was not me. If we can go to the next slide. Oh, and then some of the stuff that, I think this is more on just what we supported. So there was also an ASU protest that I kind of recognize some people here from too. And then we did the rally for the families of police brutality. That was outside of City Hall in Phoenix. And that's when we brought all of the families together with our community partners. So we had this really like dope Black and brown solidarity going on. Justice for Vigil for James Garcia, for James in the Vigil and the March. High school, we had a student-led protest, Imagining a Phoenix Without Police. That was dope. Defund the Phoenix Police Rally. So by no means were all of the shit that happened over the summer just BLM. There were organizations that sprang up and did other stuff, but a lot of the stuff that we did was in coalition with other organizations. So it was probably, you know, more publicized, and you may have heard and seen some of these things more, but a lot of these events were successful. Some had to get cut early because of white supremacists coming out and threatening us with their guns, including the white supremacist that you've seen in the Capitol with the fur on. Yes, he's from Arizona, and we've seen him on the ground lots of times. Next slide. Sorry, I think I'm going over. So I think this is almost done though. So Navajo solidarity work. So we went from 6 families in one community in Black Mesa to 60 families in 2 communities. Black Mesa and Hard Rock, we raised over $25,000, started a partnership with Phoenix Mutual Aid, and supporting vulnerable communities throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. So just building the solidarity with Indigenous folks there in Navajo Nation. Next slide, please. This is just a little bit about our communication. So our organization kind of blew up a little bit. So this is just gives you some numbers on that. So Instagram, we had 2,000 followers. We now have 38,000 followers. Facebook, we had 1,500. Now we have 14,800. Twitter, we had 800 followers. Now we have 10,800. So we just encourage all of our followers and the people who are now hopping on the movement that BLM, you know, is a movement. It's been around for a while before these uprisings, and this is not a moment. This is a movement. So we hope folks continue to organize and not just show up when one thing happens and they think it's time to party. On to the next slide. And then membership and base, we went from 15 Black members to 55, went from a core team of 6, and we now have, we grew to 12, and then Dad said 11, we now have 10 core members, again, primarily queer Black females who are, and femmes who are in that core team. Budget grew by 10K, went from being able to afford an office to growing out of our current office. So we are currently looking for a larger office than the one we have. And we went from all volunteer to hiring about 4 people. So we hired somebody, but they declined our offer. But we do have an operations lead, and we do have 2 security teams positions. But if you know anybody who's interested in comms and wants to run our communications, please tell them to go onto our website and email us their resume. We are still looking for a communications person. So our largest Zoom call, which we are very proud of, was over 400 people. So we just want to think about, like, post-COVID, how do we get all these people to come back out in a space, right? So, but how do we, and to build that, you know, massive organization power, but also being intentional about it, because this is not just about building critical mass. It's also about building actual community and the safety that we actually need for each other. And then on to the next slide. Okay, I'm done. I'm going to stop talking. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Mimi, for talking about the transformative work of BLM Phoenix Metro. Okay, so I'm sure lots of people have a lot of questions and want to continue engaging with all our panelists. because we have a pretty full schedule, I think we'll have time for one question for now, and then hopefully at the end we can have some more. But it looks like Kyla had a great question, so I'm going to repaste that back in the chat, and I'll read it out. But the question was initially addressed to Grace, but if all of the panelists want to speak to this, just considering thinking about the notion of accountability, and different experiences with your own organizing, then that would be great. So I'll paste that right now, but I'll read it out loud just so folks can hear. Okay, so Kyla said, thank you so much for your presentations, questions for Grace, but also if all the panelists want to reply. In the absence of punishment, what does justice look like? What does healing look like? Grace, your research tells us what folks in Barrio Centro consider safety to look like. How does agape love interact with the notion of accountability? Can you speak to the experiences in the barrio and your own experiences with the university state? And yes, again, thank you all. And if Grace, Klee, and Miriam or Mimi all want to speak to at least part of this question, then that would be wonderful.
Wow, thank you for the question. That's a big question. I'll answer it in pieces if that's okay. So this question of like, what instead of punishment is one that is routinely asked when we try to signal a different way forward. And I'm going to answer this question, I guess, from the perspective of being a survivor and what that looks like moving through the punishment system. As a survivor of harm, what I really wanted was to be taken care of. I wanted for my child to be taken care of. I wanted resources, and I really could care less about the person who actually caused the harm. What I really wanted was to feel whole again, and for my child to feel whole again. And the system is not organized to deliver that. So, in the absence of punishment, what does justice look like? I think that justice looks like radical love, right? You know, because as humans, we're all capable of causing harm, of receiving it. And we keep looking to the state, I think, to provide us with a way forward. And it's always more damaging. I'm thinking about a letter that I received from a woman inside. Her name's Beth. And what she was asking for, you know, before she entered the system, and even now as she's navigating the system, what she wants, essentially what she was asking for, was mental health support. And that's not something that the prison will give you, right? There's no like therapy or caretaking separate from like what other women inside, what other people inside give to one another, right? Like there is caretaking inside. It's just that the state doesn't actually give you that, right? And this notion of agape love, right? Like when I say that, for me, what does that mean? It means that it's not about how I feel. It's a choice. It's a commitment, and it transcends me, right? So I'll tell another story. When I was I graduated from ASU's Justice Studies program, and when I was in my second year, I had an undergrad student, I was teaching a class, and the student failed her midterm. And I followed all of the rules, right? Like I went to my department chair, asked her to review the exam, and that I would stand by whatever grade the department chair assessed. She gave the student a lower grade than I had even given her. And the student was really upset, and she found my mugshot. I'm formerly incarcerated. And she sent it to all of the students in the class and printed it out and showed it to everyone in my department. And the result of that was that I became persona non grata on campus. So I didn't do anything wrong, and I was punished for that. I was removed from the classroom. I didn't receive a fellowship or a teaching position. I remained unplaced for over 2 years. And what I wanted to do in that moment, so this goes back to like, what does that mean, right? What does it mean to be like accountable? What does it mean to practice what we say? What I asked for was to be able to have a conversation with my class. Because, you know, like we talk about collateral consequences of the punishment system, it's not just like these various restrictions, the difficulties getting a job, which I experienced too, housing. It's the way that people relate to you and see you as less than human. And I wasn't allowed to do that. This is another of the collateral consequences, like painted as guilty, always guilty. So my choice in that moment was to not just defend myself, but to use myself also as an example for how we can move forward. And it was those like experiences that actually became the genesis of reframing justice, because I felt like, you know, if only people could hear our stories, maybe they would choose differently. Maybe policy would look different. Maybe the way that we interact with one another would look different. So I'm happy to speak to that further if you have more questions.
Thank you so much, Grace. Mimi and Klee, do either of you, I know you both talked in your presentations about what justice and what healing might look like in different forms, but is there anything else that you would like to add to those notions, or anything else that you would like to share?
Sure. I'll just add that our cultures are our first frameworks for action. And so policing, and prisons are really relatively new to Indigenous communities. We have had generations upon generations of transformative and restorative justice practices without police and policing in prisons. The Dene peacemaking programs that are currently actually in practice in the Navajo judicial system are one example of that, but that exists outside of and has a very long genealogy beyond the complementary mechanism it has to the judicial system in the Navajo Nation currently. That being said, we, in all of our organizing, we come at it with the perspective that we can't offer any safe spaces, but we try to create safer spaces that are threatening to all systems of oppression and behaviors. And so I won't go into detail about that, but it's particularly at Talahoan Info Shop, for example, that's an agreement that we have. And so we bring that sort of framework of agreements to all the spaces and organizations that we have in transformative and restorative justice are both central forces of that. And we build that into our security culture as well. So we advocate that responsibility and accountability are part of security culture, because things that make cultures insecure, in particular our movements, are oppressive behaviors and actions. And so if we don't consider that as part of the ways to make our communities secure, our movements secure, then we are most typically just reacting when problematic behaviors or predators come in and abuse people in our communities. So if we build those frameworks out from the get-go, then we hopefully, it's not guaranteed, make our communities less prone to those forms of violence. And so having those frameworks from the onset is really key. And we have lots of bad experiences, lots of good experiences. And I will say that sometimes transformative justice looks like kicking someone's ass. It's more complicated than that, but that's a simplistic and sensational way of saying that there are a range of things that are complicated responses, range of actions are complicated responsive, that are culturally based frameworks as well. It's, there's new activists sort of speak around these issues, but these are very old practices that exist with many of our communities, undocumented communities who don't call the cops for very specific reasons, have their own systems of justice. We just don't acknowledge them as such.
Thank you. Mimi, do you have any final thoughts on these notions of justice or accountability, or anything else that you couldn't get to in your great presentation?
Yeah, I just kind of like, just to echo what the other two presenters were saying, like, accountability is definitely a thing. And just because, we're abolitionists who believe in transformative justice, all of these things, that doesn't mean that folks aren't held accountable when they cause harm. So that still also has to be an intricate part of the work, or else again we have to get to the root to figure out why this happened, and again, so that they don't cause harm again. But and I do think that is situational when it comes to accountability, and it takes community also to hold themselves accountable for how they may have also helped perpetuate particular levels of harm and enabled somebody to cause that harm, right? So I think that just keeping that in mind when we're talking about justice is really important. But also, the important work is building out our own frameworks for this, and our own spaces for our people to land on this. For BLM Phoenix Metro, we run like the Black Panther Party in the sense that we ran in ministries, in the sense that we are 25% tear down, 75% build up. So that means tearing down the system, 75% building up our own systems of accountability, our own systems of care, our own systems for healing, medical, education, right? So the primarily is the building of the up of the work that is important, just like the party and the reasons why we have medical clinics today, right? Black Panther Party and all these things. So in doing that work, is where we have fleshed out ways of holding comrades accountable, and how we can do that in a healthier way than, again, just putting somebody in a cage. So yeah, I think the building up of the work that needs to be done within community is what has to be prioritized in order for this to be successful.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to Grace and Klee and Mimi, all for sharing your wisdom and your experiences and these different ways of world making and engaging beyond what we currently.
Thank you so much, Salma, and thank you, Sultana, for sharing Salma with us. That was wonderful. What a beautiful song. My heart is still a little shaky from that. Thank you all so much for remaining with us through this musical interlude, and we're moving into the last portion of the community forum today. We're a little short on time, as is always the case, but what we're going to do is put everyone into breakout rooms. Some of you will be with people from local to global, or some of you will be with some of our panelists. But we're going to break people into our breakout rooms. We'll have about 15 minutes to share our observations, comments, create collective questions, and think about what kind of collective actions we can do going forward based on the ideas that our amazing set of speakers have shared with us today. And there's so much amazing overlap about transformative justice, restorative justice, racial justice, defund the police. All these are amazing concepts that need to be worked together. So let's hope that we can share some of our ideas and questions and concerns with each other in those small breakout rooms. Then we'll reconvene about 12:15, and Dr. Beth Swadener will run us through the last portion of the community forum today. So I will see you all again in about 15 minutes. And Lane Benton will be in charge of putting us in our breakout rooms. So please accept that when that happens. You should see a button on the bottom of your screen saying join a breakout room. Go ahead and press on that, I think. Actually, I'm not seeing Lane here. So if people would go to that breakout room. Oh, do people not have the breakout room button on the bottom?
Hold on, I'm having technical difficulty. Give me a second.
Okay, Lane is on it. If not, we could just have a group discussion with the 29 or so of us that are left, if that's amenable to people, since we are a little bit short on time.
Jen, I just wanted to say, like, Salma is in hurry, so she's gonna leave right here.
Okay, no problem.
So,
Salma, thank you so much. Maybe everyone come off mute and give her a little round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
I'm so glad that you like the music, and it's in whole other language, and still you guys loved it, and I'm so glad for that. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
We had to do something to keep the festival and forum and festival, and it'll always be music. Actually, we'll have a guided meditation in an upcoming event and other mind-body embodied experiences. Okay.
So the breakout rooms are now ready. So let's go ahead and go into those breakout rooms just for a few minutes, and we'll reconvene at 12:15. All right, Lane. Thank you. So go ahead and hopefully you should be getting an invitation, and go ahead and join that. I think the people who aren't joining may not be at their computer right now. Let them hang out.
That's a possibility.
Welcome back, everyone. I know we were right at the point of a question in the small group that I was in, and I would guess that many of you were. I really appreciate those of you who shared notes in the chat, and you can take a quick look at that. We are saving the chat. We're taping the event, and so we as a planning team will be using that input and the inspiration of the time today as we plan future events. And I'll just say, as a founder, a co-founder with graduate students back in 2001 of Local to Global Justice, I appreciate everyone that has attended today and those who have stuck it out. It's long. This one is 2 hours. Others will be 90 minutes. And I was very moved, as several people personally messaged me and we saw in the chat, by the panel presentations and walking the talk of social justice and interrupting systems of oppression, and so many issues that we all care about and need to find ways to make a difference on those issues. I was hoping to have time, and we have a bit of time, but not a lot, to just ask each one person from each of the 4 groups, starting with the 4th group perhaps, just to say something that came up in their group that they would like to share with a larger group beyond the chat. Or it could be an acknowledgement, an upcoming action. This part, as we planned it, was to mirror, for those of you who've attended the event before, when we all gather in this space called Ed Lecture Hall and say, we've come together, usually it's for 3 days, this is for 2 hours, and what are some of the takeaways? What are some of the organizing ideas that we might have? So for now, I think it's just going to be some sharing from the discussion that we've just shared together. So someone from group number 4, unmute yourself, and you've got a couple minutes. Thanks.
So, okay, I will go from group number 4. So in group number 4, there was David, Cecily, Brandon, Eric, and me. So David shared, like, he talked about like the educational equity and educational environment, and he actually highly criticized like the educational environment at ASU. And so his main concern is justice in educational environment. And Cecily talked about educational equity and educational injustice as well. And she loves powering her students. And so basically educational justice and equity is her main concern as well. And Brandon talked about like the defunding the police, and she loved Miriam's work, the way she presented the defunding the police concept and the indigenous justice by Klee. And Eric talked about progressive state, progressive justice, progressive environment. And he thinks the situation here in Arizona is quite different than others. So these are the things we discussed in group number 4. Hope it helps.
Thank you. Good to hear, even briefly. How about group number 3?
Sorry, I forgot what group we were in. So group 3 was Klee and Terry and Arrow and Christine and myself. And we had a nice discussion about recognition politics, the politics of recognition. And Klee had some great links to share with us. And also, I hope everyone can see the document that he uploaded in the chat, which will open as a Google Doc, I think, with some really great advice on how to organize more effectively and how to be an accomplice rather than an ally.
Thanks, Jen. And that's a good reminder to check the chat and, you know, pull in some of the links so that they'll be with you after we have to go our ways today. And we will be regrouping on March 20th and again on April 22nd, just to remind you. How about group number 2?
Hi, yeah, so group number 2, we had a great conversation about some of the direct ways that we can help with our communities and help with that community resurgence and resilience. And Stan had mentioned how he's been involved in supporting prisoners directly. He said this can happen, like he's also done it through organizations like Anarchist Black Cross, which has supported political prisoners, and Food Not Bombs. But also he just locally, you know, reaches out to activists and creates connections with friends and those who are incarcerated. Kate spoke about, you know, really enjoyed, I think, and I think all of us, the breadth of how like Black Lives Matter is supporting communities with healing, not just focused on like one area, but very multidimensional. And for her, really trying to get rid of that do good narrative and this like perpetuating this capitalist oppression, some of these mentalities in that activist work, and something about how to be more free in the practices and not just performative. So she had a beautiful comparison of, you know, like an ecosystem where not all flowers need the same amount of water, and just kind of figuring out how to navigate that. We had Mimi that was talking about also the difficulties in activism and trying to decide whether you do join these sort of nonprofit industrial complexes that have been created under a lot of these capitalist neoliberal type systems to avoid being transactional in activism. And that was definitely a great thought to, you know, how do you not compromise your values, but also be able to get resources. Emma is a high school student, and she is bringing activism in her high school community from grassroots organizations to support environmental activism, including things like even just picking up trash at parks and cleaning the communities, as well as initiating a student-led LGBTQ diversity type day where they raise money, where they have uniforms at their school, but by not wearing uniforms, they would get to pay $1, and that money would go to support some of these diversity type initiatives. And then Sheena, we had, that was also a teacher, and she is actively working on creating safe spaces for her students, which is, again, you know, very grassroots oriented. So we had a lot of great discussions. And then I did just post an activity that we are doing as a group of students from ASU, kind of this grassroots change to try to have more accessibility for disability justice. And this is a live event if you're able to join us. So yeah, that's an opportunity that's coming up on March 19th.
Thanks for that. My policy seminars, we do laser talks, and I realize I'm asking the group facilitators or reps to do a laser summary, and appreciate it very much. Really appreciate the resources in the chat. Just want to keep redirecting everyone's attention there, which is something we don't really have when we're in person. I am, because of time, not going to list everyone in group one, but some of the things that were stated were identifying with the BLM emphasis on a percentage of building up being, you know, 75%, and less with tear it down, even while we work to tear down and interrupt systems of systemic racism and other oppressions. We talked about energy sovereignty. We had someone in our group, I'll name him, Pat Lauderdale, who works a lot with both ACLU and AIM, the American Indian movement, that some of you are familiar with, a long time movement. And the notion of eco-consciousness, Matt talked about that, and including different kinds of systems thinking. And we looked at how, giving credit to Grace for this, how applying transformational justice to institutional spaces, that notion of how it often just doesn't work, and looked at examples from neighborhoods, getting to know each other better, the Barrio Farm Project, an informal, emergent kind of day camp almost for kids in a neighborhood, and meeting their needs, and just what it takes to gain more confidence for some who are newer to direct action, and to this type of community organizing that local to global justice is always about, and this first virtual forum had emphasized, especially when taking on deeply embedded systems, questioning whiteness and male voice and better listening. A number of issues came up. So the group discussions, while a bit rushed perhaps, I'm glad we did them. And I want to deeply thank each of the panel members for sharing very personally from just a wealth of experiences. I've had the pleasure of knowing each of the three presenters and just value their work beyond words very deeply. I'll remind you what's coming next. Coming next from Local to Global Justice is March 20th. We'll be looking at issues of migration, refugee, asylum seeker, and immigrant rights, including No Mas Muertos. I won't name all the presenters, time doesn't permit. Then on Actual Earth Day, we're shifting to an evening on April 22nd. We'll be getting underway at 6 o'clock, 6 to 7:30 on the 22nd. And one of our former leaders is beaming in via Zoom from Colombia, from Medellin, Denise Roca Servat. And she has been a leader in Local to Global Justice, and she is very active in Indigenous water protectors movements in both Peru and there. We'll have a local climate healer, Shailesh Rao, and we will have, again, Indigenous perspectives on what it means to be custodians of the earth. And that was so powerful, Klee, when you mentioned we're now not just looking at what we have done in the Anthropocene or as humans on this planet for 7 generations, but for 700. So thank you. This was what it was. It was another Zoom meeting, and it's a gorgeous day. And so thank you for still being here and for all the work that you do individually and, most importantly, collectively. Thank you. And maybe the planning team can stay on the line just 5 minutes, little debrief, okay?
Yeah, thanks all for coming. That was so great.